This is IGN. Like a joke you've heard before, this sequel just doesn't quite land as well as the original. This is your IGN review of High on Life 2 by Travis Northrop. There's an old refrain among comedians that no joke survives its retelling, and you don't need to look any further than the shoddy track record of comedy movie sequels to see truth in that. Fortunately, funny video games tend to fare much better, from Borderlands 2 to Portal 2, and so you would hope that a weird, deeply inappropriate game about drugs and talking guns like High on Life 2 might enjoy the same kind of evolution. In some ways, it does just that, with many of its existing bright spots shining even more brightly. The lovable weapons that serve as your companions are more amusing than ever, and movement outside of combat is greatly improved by radical new skateboarding mechanics. But other areas don't hold up as well, like the significantly less polished story, jokes that don't land quite as often, and performance issues that are even more shaky than the first game. I still enjoyed my time with High on Life 2 and truly relished the opportunity to return to a world this goofy any chance I get, but this is definitely closer to Zoolander 2 than 22 Jump Street. High on Life 2 picks up right where our foul-mouthed cast of characters left off. Sort of. After a dizzyingly fast intro recaps the events of the first game and gets you back into the action, you find yourself on the wrong side of the law and ready to begin the familiar process of hunting down a list of baddies to bring down an evil organization. Instead of a drug cartel, this time the villain comes in the form of a pharmaceutical company that I felt no guilt killing off members of over the course of the roughly 10-hour campaign, now playing the role of rogue assassin as I ply my trade of death illegally, a nice twist to the otherwise nearly identical setup of the original. Sadly, the story built around this string of over-the-top murder missions is a bit sloppy, with a couple big reveals that don't really land, and a surprising number of monologues to explain motives and technologies. There's a shocking amount of tell, don't show for a game that is typically very intentionally about not sweating the details and following the rule of cool. It sort of reminds me of a D&D campaign that's gone on way too long and starts to feel like the DM is twisting himself in knots trying to get that cool payoff, missing the mark too often in the process. The good news is that the plot at least moves along at a pretty fast clip with a steady stream of silly gags to keep you guessing, even when the story gets messy. Unfortunately, a wider variety of guns hasn't done much to make the sloppy and overly simplistic gunplay any better. In fact, it even feels a touch worse. Some of the new weapons are quite crisp compared to the wonky slug throwers of yore, especially Sheath's burst fire that reminds me of the battle rifle from Halo. But with so many enemies and projectiles flying around, claustrophobic rooms with odd geometry that enemies get caught behind and within, and weapon accuracy being a bit all over the place, combat leans into chaos more than anything else. Most of the time that's fine because you're playing a game that's all about over-the-top nonsense, but when you occasionally die due to unfair circumstances or when a fight drags on for a bit too long, it can kill the mood. To its credit, the enemy variety is mostly decent, with a stream of ugly new creatures to blast apart introduced at a steady clip, from flying robotic freaks to spooky, scary skeletons. But if you were looking for a polished first-person shooter with gunfights that feel at all coherent, look elsewhere. The biggest and most interesting change with High on Life 2 is mobility, as you're given a trusty skateboard in the opening minutes that serves as your travel companion throughout the adventure. Instead of fighting on foot, most encounters highly encourage or outright require you to be grinding on rails, riding on the sides of walls, and soaring through the air on your skateboard. When it comes to traveling from place to place or navigating your way through platforming sections, this is pretty awesome, and a shocking amount of your time will be spent rolling around like you're playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. I didn't really expect the skateboard to play such a big role, but honestly, I can't imagine going back to the relative sluggishness of running around on foot. High on Life 2 is a fun sequel that expands on the original's best ideas, including the absurd and memorable boss fights and charming talking guns, while also introducing some neat new concepts like the skateboarding mechanic, even if that doesn't do combat any favors. Unfortunately, it also takes a step backward in plenty of other areas, like its underwhelming story, even sloppier gunplay, and rough technical performance. I was still happy to return to this goofy, completely foul world of offensive creatures and irreverent anti-heroes, the likes of which we simply don't get enough of these days, but like any joke you've heard multiple times before, this second stab just doesn't quite land as well as the original. High on Life 2's IGN score? 6 out of 10. Thanks for listening to IGN. My name is Tony Jackson, and for the latest High on Life updates, visit us at IGN.com.